relative to the Earth. Apologize for the metric units, so we'll have to do a conversion there for you. But as Jeff said earlier, it'll be a 2.5 minute burn, 2.5 minutes. In that, we use about 2,900 pounds of Orion's initial propellant load. That's about 20% of the total load that we start the mission with. So relatively short burn, but it is one of the 4 big ones that we perform as part of the mission.
Yeah, and Chris, and thank you for your question as well on the pad. The team is currently working through the pad post-launch inspections. There are a number of hazards out there that they're working through. We did anticipate some amount of damage, and they are finding some amount of damage. Again, the vehicle produced 8.8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. We did, for the very first time with a rocket of this class with solids, have a ignition overpressure and sound suppression system in place. So, if you recall watching right at that initial, the final seconds before liftoff, there was a huge amount of water that came from that water tower that sits within the pad perimeter, and all that water came out of that tower, went down the pipe, across, and up onto through some piping into the surface of the mobile launcher, and that was purposefully there to dampen the acoustic shock as the rocket lifted off, because that can come down and bounce back up towards the rocket. So that water was there to dampen the acoustic shock, to largely protect the rocket. We couldn't put water everywhere on the mobile launch tower. The umbilicals did fine. The structure itself did fine, but we are finding some damage. For me, the most impressive photo that I've seen from damage was the blast doors on the elevators were removed through the pressure wave of the rocket, and they're having to restore that functionality with the elevators. So there are a number of findings, and because of the inconvenience, now we don't have elevators functioning at the mobile launcher, and it is a very tall structure. Folks are having to walk up and down it, and it's taking them a little extra time to get through it. But that said, the mobile launcher itself performed well. We just are having to work our way through some of the damage assessments, and it's taking us a little longer.
Thank you both. Our next question will be from Marcia Smith with spacepolicyonline.com.
Thanks so much. I think this question is probably for Jeff. I'm wondering, how many burns are there altogether of the arms and of the auxiliary engines? And separately, perhaps for Jeff or for Mike, where did the core stage come down? And did you get any visual sightings of it?
So I'll talk about the 4 major burns that we have on Artemis 1. Of course, we've been talking about the outbound powered flyby as well as the distant retrograde insertion. After we do a half a loop in the distant retrograde orbit, we'll then do a distant retrograde departure, and then we'll do a return powered flyby. And so those are really the 4 major burns that we use the OMS engine for, to get Orion into orbit around the moon and then to bring it home after we complete the half rev there. We do have some smaller correction burns. I think there's 12 or so of those that we do, but they're much smaller. We use the attitude maneuvering jets. So you can really think of it as 4 major burns for the entirety of Artemis 1 on Orion.
And Marcia, again, thank you for your question. In terms of the core stage disposal, if you recall, we inserted the insertion altitude was a 975 by 16 nautical mile insertion altitude. We do have to loft the orbit with the Block 1 of the Space Launch System, which we will have an upgrade with what we'll call Block 1B with the enhanced upper stage starting with Artemis 4, where we don't have to loft. But because we have to loft with the interim cryo propulsion stage in order to have enough performance to make our way to the moon, we lowered the perigee to 16 nautical miles, which is going to get Earth capture, and the core stage certainly did that. It came down in the Pacific to the east of Hawaii and to the west of the West Coast, so well away from any human human presence, and it's safely splashed down in the Pacific Ocean.